Australia has a very strategic territory in the north, close to Indonesia, rich in minerals, and directly facing the Asia-Pacific trade route. But strangely, this region is almost empty. There are only expanses of red soil, dry air, and small villages scattered far apart from each other. Yet the northern region covers nearly a third of Australia's landmass, vast but almost devoid of people. Meanwhile, in the south, people are crowded into big cities like Sydney and Melbourne. One continent, two worlds, one bustling and cool, the other quiet and scorching. Why do people choose to stay away from the north? Is it because the geography is unsuitable for human habitation, or because people are quick to give up? While other continents are defined by war and politics, Australia is defined by its own geography. It is a continent whose fate is written not by human hands, but by the weather, the land, and time. Northern Australia is an example. On paper, this region should be a blessing. Close to Indonesia, located on the Asia-Pacific shipping route, and home to reserves of minerals, natural gas, and strategic minerals coveted by the world. But in reality, it feels like a curse. Here, heat is not just a temperature, but a test that evaporates water, erodes energy, and dispels hope. During the day, the ground reflects light like burning glass. At night, the air becomes cold and dry, piercing to the bone. Northern Australia is alive, but it is not friendly. For southerners, this region is not a place to build a home. It is a place to be tested by nature. And that is the great paradox of this continent. While many countries scramble for land and living space, Australia has left millions of kilometres of untouched land. The Northern Territory, for example, covers an area of more than 1.3 million square kilometres, almost twice the size of the state of Texas in the United States. However, its population is only around 250,000. By comparison, the city of San Francisco alone has a population of more than 800,000 people, packed into an area that is thousands of times smaller. On a nighttime satellite map, the difference is striking. Southern Australia glows with city lights, while the northern part is almost dark, only a small bright spot in Darwin, the rest silent. This is the sharpest contrast in the Southern Hemisphere, not between rich and poor, but between humans and nature. Because here, it is not politics that limits life, but the earth that chooses who can survive. It all started with the sky. Above the red earth of Australia, there is a subtropical high-pressure belt, a kind of invisible ring encircling the Earth around the 30th parallel south. This belt causes air to descend to the surface and suppresses cloud formation. As a result, the sky appears blue and calm, but behind it lies a deadly curse of dryness. According to the Bureau of Meteorology, more than 80% of Australia receives less than 600 millimetres of rainfall per year, making it the driest inhabited continent in the world. In some inland areas of the Northern Territory and Western Australia, that figure drops below 250 millimetres, equivalent to the deserts of North Africa. This is why the north, despite its proximity to tropical waters, remains arid. The hot air that should bring rain is instead trapped and falls as heat waves. Northeasterly winds from Asia carry moisture, but it dissipates quickly when it hits the high-pressure belt over the continent. The result, rain comes only briefly and leaves too quickly. On the eastern side, the Great Dividing Range exacerbates the situation. These mountains stretch 3,500 kilometres from Queensland to Victoria, forming a natural wall that blocks moist clouds from the Pacific Ocean. On the eastern side, rain falls heavily, making the land fertile and cities grow. But on the western side, the air falls hot and dry, creating a belt of desert that seems to divide Australia into two worlds. One green and alive, the other red and silent. The city of Darwin is the most striking example of this climate paradox. Each year, the city receives around 1,800 millimeters of rain, but almost all of it falls in just 4 months. The rest is a long, dry, hot and exhausting summer. During the rainy season, the ground turns to mud and rivers overflow. But a few months later, the same ground cracks like pottery, hard and dusty. For humans, this rhythm is difficult to predict. Farmers don't know when to plant, residents don't know when to prepare. Nature moves like a giant machine that doesn't follow the calendar. From above, the weather in northern Australia looks beautiful and clean, but for those who live beneath it, it's like struggling under a merciless sky. This is where geography becomes destiny. If the sky is the first cause of Australia's silence, then the land is the second reason, and perhaps the oldest. Geologists call this continent the oldest continent in the world, still inhabited by humans. Beneath its red plains lie layers of rock that have remained unchanged for more than 500 million years. Northern Australia, from Arnhem Land to the Western Australian border, stands on an ancient plate called the North Australian Craton. This land is no longer geologically active. There are no volcanoes, no major earthquakes, no nutrient renewal processes like in Asia or America. This means that the soil has never been renewed by the earth. It is old, nutrient-poor, and exhausted. According to Geoscience Australia, about 40% of Australia's landmass is now classified as arid and semi-arid zone, a dry region with very low fertility. Even in areas that appear green on satellite maps, the topsoil is often only a few centimeters thick before turning into sand, salt, or hard rock. For farmers, this is not just a challenge. It is a reminder that not all land is created for cultivation. Many large agricultural projects in the 20th century attempted to revive the northern interior, but ultimately failed. Tractors sent from the south got stuck in the mud during the rainy season, then burned up in the heat during the dry season. The promised fields of cotton, wheat, and soybeans turned into empty land full of dry bushes. Even after modern technology arrived, the results remained the same. Artificial irrigation from the Daly and Ord rivers was only able to fertilize a small area around them. Water was abundant in one season but disappeared in another. The poor soil could not retain water, and the salty soil damaged the roots of the plants. This land seems to hold the memory of a long past, a time when Australia was still connected to Antarctica and India in the supercontinent of Gondwana. When the land separated and drifted north millions of years ago, Australia slowly dried up and became rocky. And since then, no new mountains have emerged, no great rivers have been born. The earth here has stopped growing and stopped giving. That is why, even though it is rich in gold, nickel, and iron ore, its surface remains barren. It is like a land that is only willing to give up its riches to be mined, but not life to be grown. Northern Australia is not an evil land. It is simply old, silent, and no longer cares about human ambitions. And perhaps that is where its geographical tragedy began, when humans wanted to plant hope in a land that had even stopped dreaming. Before the arrival of European colonists, this arid land was not empty. For more than 50,000 years, humans had lived here, not to conquer the earth, but to live in harmony with it. They were the Aboriginal tribes who knew Australia better than anyone else. For them, nature was not just a place to live, but a living spirit. Mountains, rivers, and rocks were part of the ancestral story they called the Dreamtime, a time when the earth and humans still spoke the same language. They moved with the seasons, hunting when the rains came, then leaving the land to recover, There were no cities, but there was harmony. No machines, but there was wisdom. According to the National Museum of Australia, there are more than 250 Aboriginal languages and hundreds of different ethnic groups. Each region has its own way of life, but all hold the same principle. Humans are merely guests on the land, not its owners. All that changed when British ships arrived in 1788. The land was fenced off, the White Australia policy was enforced, and the indigenous population was displaced. Ironically, the nation that came to conquer this land never truly understood it. And when Japan bombed Darwin in 1942, Australia realised they had a vast continent, but they had lost those who knew best how to protect it. Today, thousands of years after the first humans set foot on this land, Northern Australia has become the most strategic region in the Southern Hemisphere. It faces Southeast Asia directly, is only about 700 kilometres from the Tanimbar Islands in Indonesia, and serves as a natural gateway between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. In theory, this region is an extraordinary geopolitical asset, but in reality, it remains sparsely populated. The city of Darwin is the only major centre of life in the north. It covers an area of 3,163 square kilometres, about 2.5 times the size of Los Angeles. However, its population is only around 150,000 people, a number that is even smaller than the population of a small town in California that can be explored in a matter of minutes. Outside Darwin, human life is even rarer. Highways stretch for hundreds of kilometres without a single house or gas station in sight. Airplanes flying overhead often cross the desert without a single sign of life below. For the government, this is not just a demographic issue, it is also a matter of defence. The emptier this region becomes, the more vulnerable it is to external threats. Since World War II, when Japan bombed Darwin in 1942, the Australian military has realised that they need a guard in the north. But 7 decades later, that guard came from another country. In 2011, the United States and Australia signed the Darwin Agreement, paving the way for thousands of US Marines to be stationed on a rotational basis at a military base in the north. The goal was clear: to maintain stability in the Indo-Pacific, counter threats in the South China Sea, and monitor the movements of Asian powers. Now, on land once considered uninhabitable, stands a joint base that is one of the most important strategic surveillance points in the Southern Hemisphere. But the irony remains the same. Despite its military strategic importance, the region has failed to become a centre of civilian life. The cost of living in Darwin is 30% higher than in southern cities such as Adelaide or Melbourne. Infrastructure is expensive, distances between cities are too great, and the weather is extreme. Temperatures can reach 45 degrees Celsius, while tropical storms can arrive without warning. Even government efforts through major projects such as Developing the North in 2015 and Smart City Darwin in 2022 have done little to change the situation. Whenever there is talk of building a new city or industrial centre, the problems are always the same: high costs, Aboriginal customary land, and uncontrollable natural conditions. Customary law protects many areas in the north, especially around Arnhem Land and Kakadu, which are considered sacred by the local community. For them, this land is not an economic resource, but a spiritual heritage, a place where their ancestors still live in the rocks, trees, and water. Australia may be able to build military bases on it, but it cannot force people to settle on land that they do not want to change. And therein lies the quietest irony. The region that is most strategic for global geopolitics remains empty of life. Now, humans are still trying to challenge Australia's geography. In Perth and Adelaide, seawater is being converted into fresh water. In the north, the Sun Cable project is designed to transmit solar energy 4,000 kilometers to Singapore. Hydroponic farming, automated irrigation systems, and heat-resistant homes are being tested in regions once deemed uninhabitable. Technology does open up opportunities, but it doesn't change the nature of the land. Because in Australia, it's not technology that determines who can survive. It's patience. This land is not an enemy, but a harsh teacher. It doesn't reject humans. It just reminds us, life can't be forced to grow in a place that isn't ready to give it space. Maybe one day, Northern Australia will come back to life. Not because humans conquered it, but because humans finally learned to live with it. Because on this continent, geography is not just a map, it is destiny. And when we look at the empty northern part of the world map, remember, it is not a sign of failed development, but a sign that in one corner of the earth, nature still has its own will.